The morning sun cast long shadows across Chicago's south side as Officer Jake Morrison adjusted his radio and checked his watch. It was 7:23 a.m. on what seemed like another routine Tuesday patrol. Beside him, Rex, his 3-year-old German Shepherd. Partner sat alert in the passenger seat of their marked patrol car, his dark brown eyes scanning the streets with the intensity that had made him one of the department's most decorated K-9 officers. Jake had been partnered with Rex since the dog was barely 2 years old, fresh out of the rigorous training program at the Illinois State Police Academy. Together, they'd become an unstoppable team. Rex's nose had led them to over 40 drug busts. His tracking skills had helped locate 7 missing children, and his protective instincts had saved Jake's life twice during dangerous arrests. In 3 years, they had never failed to complete a mission successfully. Rex wasn't just Jake's partner. He was his best friend, his confidant, and the reason Jake looked forward to coming to work every single day. "All right, boy," Jake said, reaching over to scratch behind Rex's ears. "Let's see what today brings us." Rex's tail wagged briefly, but his attention remained focused on the street ahead. The dog had an almost supernatural ability to sense when something was wrong, and Jake had learned to trust those instincts completely. They were cruising down Harrison Street, past the familiar landscape of old warehouses and converted lofts that characterized this transitioning neighborhood when Rex suddenly became agitated. The dog began whining, a sound so unusual that Jake immediately pulled over to the curb. In all their time together, Jake had heard Rex bark, growl, and even howl during training exercises, but he had never heard the dog whine like this. It was a sound filled with urgency, and something else Jake couldn't quite identify. "What is it, Rex?" Jake asked, studying his partner's behavior. The German Shepherd was pacing in the small space of the front seat, his ears perked forward, nose working overtime as he tested the air coming through the slightly opened windows. Before Jake could react, Rex did something that defied every aspect of his training. The disciplined police dog bolted from the car the moment Jake opened the door, completely ignoring the sharp command to stay that had never failed to stop him before. Jake's heart raced as he watched his perfectly trained partner sprint across the street, weaving between parked cars with a desperation Jake had never witnessed. "Rex! Rex, come!" Jake shouted, his voice echoing off the brick buildings as he chased after his partner. But Rex wasn't responding to any commands. The dog had found something, and whatever it was, had triggered an instinct stronger than years of intensive training. Jake caught up to Rex in a narrow alley that ran between 2 abandoned warehouses. The dog had stopped beside a row of overflowing dumpsters, his massive frame trembling as he pawed at something behind the largest container. His whining had intensified, and now Jake could hear something else in the sound: desperation, pleading, as if Rex was trying to communicate something critically important. "What did you find, boy?" Jake asked softly, approaching slowly. Rex looked up at him with eyes that seemed almost human in their expressiveness. Jake had seen that look before, but only during the most serious situations, when Rex had found a missing child or detected a dangerous substance. But this was different. This was personal. Following Rex's focused gaze, Jake peered behind the dumpster and felt his breath catch in his throat. There, barely visible in the shadows, sat a small cardboard box that had once held bottles of wine. The box was damp from the previous night's rain, its edges soggy and beginning to fall apart. But it was what was inside the box that made Jake's heart skip a beat. Nestled in what appeared to be an old stained towel was the tiniest kitten Jake had ever seen. The little creature couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. Its orange fur matted with dirt and debris. Its eyes were barely open, just thin slits that revealed dull blue irises. The kitten's tiny chest rose and fell in rapid, shallow breaths, and even from a few feet away, Jake could hear the labored sound of "va." It's breathing. The sight was heartbreaking, but what struck Jake even more was Rex's behavior. The powerful German shepherd, trained to detect drugs and apprehend criminals, had transformed into something entirely different. With infinite gentleness, Rex lowered his large head toward the box and began nudging the tiny kitten with his nose, making soft whimpering sounds that seemed to say, "I'm here. You're not alone." Jake knelt beside the box, his training as a police officer warring with his emotions. The kitten was clearly dying. Its body was cold to the touch, and its breathing was becoming more irregular with each passing moment. Someone had abandoned this innocent creature to die alone in an alley, and if not for Rex's inexplicable instincts, they never would have found it in time, if there was still time at all. "How did you know?" Jake whispered to Rex, who was now lying down beside the box, positioning his body to shield the kitten from the cool morning breeze. "How did you possibly know?" Rex looked up at his partner with eyes that seemed to convey a message Jake had never seen before. It wasn't the alert, professional gaze of a working police dog. It was the desperate, pleading look of someone who had found something precious and was begging for help to save it. In that moment, Jake realized that his tough, professionally trained canine partner had just revealed something extraordinary, capacity for compassion that went beyond anything in his training manual. As Jake gently lifted the cardboard box, being careful not to jostle the tiny occupant, he noticed Rex's intense focus on the kitten. The dog followed every movement, staying close enough to provide warmth, but careful not to crowd the fragile creature. Something profound was happening here, something that would change all of their lives forever. "Come on, Rex," Jake said softly, cradling the box against his chest. "Let's get this little one some help." As they walked back toward the patrol car, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary rescue. Rex had found something more than just an abandoned kitten. He had found a purpose that transcended his police training. And Jake was about to witness the beginning of the most extraordinary partnership he had ever seen. The emergency sirens wailed through downtown Chicago as Jake's patrol car raced toward the Chicago Animal Emergency Hospital, the small cardboard box secured carefully on the passenger seat between him and Rex. Every few seconds, Jake glanced down at the tiny orange kitten, whose breathing had become even more labored during the 10-minute drive. Rex hadn't moved from his protective position. His large body curved around the box like a living shield, his intelligent brown eyes never leaving the dying creature inside. "Stay with us, little one," Jake whispered, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. Behind him, Rex made soft whimpering sounds, not the confident barks of a police dog, but the gentle, encouraging noises a mother might make to comfort a frightened child. It was a side of his partner Jake had never imagined existed. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez was just finishing her morning coffee when the call came in. 28 years of veterinary practice had taught her that emergency calls usually fell into predictable categories: car accident victims, poisoning cases, or the occasional exotic pet crisis. But when the dispatcher mentioned a police K9 unit bringing in a critical kitten case, she knew this would be different. "Room 3 is prepped and ready," her head technician, Maria Santos, called out as she heard the patrol car screech into the parking lot. Maria had worked alongside Dr. Rodriguez for over a decade, and they moved with the practiced efficiency of a surgical team. But nothing could have prepared them for what walked through their doors. Jake burst into the hospital, carrying the soggy cardboard box, his uniform still dusty from the alley where they'd found the kitten. But it was Rex who commanded everyone's attention. The German shepherd, typically the picture of disciplined professionalism, was exhibiting behavior that defied everything Dr. Rodriguez knew about police dogs. "She's severely hypothermic," Dr. Rodriguez announced to her team, "probably dehydrated for days, and I suspect malnutrition dating back weeks." She looked up at Jake with the expression veterinarians reserve for the worst cases. Officer Morrison, I have to be honest with you. I've seen thousands of animals in critical condition, and this little one, her chances are not good. But as Dr. Rodriguez began her initial examination, something extraordinary happened. Rex, who had been pacing anxiously near the door, suddenly approached the examination table. Instead of the aggressive or protective behavior she might have expected from a working police dog, Rex exhibited a gentleness that took her breath away. Can I try something?" Dr. Rodriguez asked Jake, her scientific curiosity overriding protocol. She had heard of therapy animals providing comfort to human patients, but she had never witnessed a dog showing such specific concern for another species. She carefully placed the kitten on a warming blanket on a lower examination table, one that would allow Rex to get closer. The moment the German Shepherd positioned himself next to the table, the kitten's vital signs, which Dr. Rodriguez was monitoring on a small device, began to show improvement. "That's impossible," whispered Maria, staring at the readout. The kitten's heart rate, which had been dangerously irregular, began to stabilize. Her breathing, while still labored, became more rhythmic. Even her body temperature showed the first signs of improvement since they'd arrived. Rex seemed to understand exactly what was happening. He carefully lowered his massive head until his warm breath was gently flowing over the kitten's tiny body. Then, with movements so deliberate and gentle they seemed almost human, he positioned himself to create a windbreak around the examination area, using his body heat to create a microenvironment of warmth and protection. "In 30 years of veterinary practice," Dr. Rodriguez said quietly, never taking her eyes off the readings, "I have never seen anything like this. It's as if he's functioning as a living incubator, but more than that, he seems to be providing some kind of emotional support that's actually affecting her physiological responses." Jake watched in amazement as his tough, professionally trained partner transformed before his eyes. Rex's entire demeanor had changed. Gone was the alert, ready-for-action posture of a police dog. In its place was something tender and nurturing that Jake wouldn't have believed if he weren't seeing it himself. "We need to start 4 fluids immediately," Dr. Rodriguez told Maria, "and I want to get her core temperature up gradually. But ... She paused, looking at Rex, who had now settled into a position where he could maintain his vigil without interfering with medical procedures. "I think our biggest asset might be right here." Over the next hour, the medical team worked to stabilize the kitten while Rex maintained his protective presence. Every time a staff member approached the table, Rex would look up not aggressively, but with an expression that clearly communicated his role as guardian. When Dr. Rodriguez needed to perform more invasive procedures, Rex would shift positions slightly, always ensuring he could see the kitten while allowing the medical team to work. The most remarkable moment came when the kitten, whom the staff had begun calling Hope, opened her eyes fully for the first time. Those tiny blue eyes focused immediately on Rex's face, and she made the softest mewing sound barely audible, but clearly directed at her protector. Rex responded with a gentle whine, and Hope's heart rate immediately became stronger and more regular. "She's responding to him," Dr. Rodriguez observed, making notes that she knew would sound impossible to anyone who hadn't witnessed it. Whatever this connection is, it's not just emotional, it's having measurable physiological effects. Rex isn't just comforting her, he's actually helping her survive. As the afternoon wore on, hospital staff began gathering to witness the unprecedented relationship unfolding before them. Rex had established himself as Hope's self-appointed guardian, reading her needs with an intuition that surpassed even the medical monitors. When Hope's breathing became labored, Rex would adjust his position to provide better airflow. When her temperature dropped, he would move closer. When she became restless, his gentle presence would calm her immediately. "I've never seen a bond form this quickly," Dr. Rodriguez confided to Jake as they watched Rex and Hope together. It's as if they were meant to find each other. Jake nodded, understanding that his life had just taken an unexpected turn. Rex had found more than just an abandoned kitten. He had discovered a purpose that went beyond police work, beyond training, beyond anything Jake had ever imagined possible. And watching his partner's gentle care for this tiny, vulnerable creature, Jake realized he was witnessing something that would change all of their lives forever. As evening shadows lengthened across Chicago, the atmosphere at the Animal Emergency Hospital had transformed from hopeful to grave. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez stood outside room 3, clipboard in hand, studying the latest test results with a heavy heart. After 8 hours of intensive care, Hope's condition had stabilized temporarily, but the prognosis remained dire. Her blood work revealed severe anemia, dangerous electrolyte imbalances, and signs of organ stress that spoke to weeks of neglect and abuse. Jake Morrison sat slumped in an uncomfortable plastic chair in the hospital's waiting area, still in his patrol uniform, his radio crackling occasionally with calls he wasn't answering. He had officially gone off duty 3 hours ago, but leaving wasn't an option. Not when Rex refused to move from Hope's side, and certainly not when he could see that his partner needed him, now more than ever. Officer Morrison? Dr. Rodriguez's voice was gentle, but carried the weight of difficult news. Jake looked up, reading the expression on her face, before she spoke a single word. In his years as a police officer, he delivered enough bad news to recognize that look. She's not going to make it through the night, is she? Jake asked quietly, saving Dr. Rodriguez from having to find the right words. Dr. Rodriguez sat down beside him, her professional demeanor softening. I've been practicing veterinary medicine for 28 years, and I've learned not to make promises I can't keep. Hope is fighting harder than any animal I've ever treated, but her body has been through too much trauma. Her kidneys are struggling, her blood pressure is unstable, and... She paused, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes love isn't enough to overcome the physical damage that's been done. Through the glass window of room 3, they could see Rex maintaining his vigil beside Hope's incubator. The German Shepherd had positioned himself in an uncomfortable-looking crouch that allowed him to keep his head close to the clear plastic container, where Hope lay connected to multiple monitoring devices. His eyes were alert and focused, tracking every breath the tiny kitten took. Has he moved at all? Dr. Rodriguez asked. Jake shook his head. Not once. Maria tried to bring him water an hour ago, and he growled at her, not aggressively, just protective. He's never growled at a medical professional before. It's like he knows that any distraction could be critical. What Jake didn't mention was how Rex's behavior was affecting him personally. In 3 years of partnership, he had never seen his dog exhibit such intense emotional investment. Rex lived for their work, the thrill of the chase, the satisfaction of a successful drug bust, the pride of finding missing persons. But this was different. This was personal in a way that transcended professional duty. As if sensing their conversation, Rex lifted his head and looked directly at Jake through the window. The expression in the dog's brown eyes was unmistakable, a plea for more time, a desperate request not to give up. Jake had seen Rex in dangerous situations during high-stress arrests, even when the dog had been injured in the line of duty. But he had never seen his partner look desperate until now. Dr. Rodriguez checked her watch. 11:47 p.m. I'm going to stay through the night, she announced, a decision that surprised even herself. If Hope is going to ... She stopped herself, not wanting to voice the inevitable. If anything changes, Rex shouldn't be alone. The next few hours passed like a slow-motion nightmare. Hope's vital signs fluctuated wildly, moments of improvement, followed by scary drops that sent alarms beeping throughout the room. Each time the monitors indicated distress, Rex would become agitated, pawing gently at the incubator and making soft whining sounds that seemed to communicate directly with the tiny patient inside. At 2:15 a.m., the first crisis hit. Hope's heart rate plummeted to dangerous levels, and her breathing became so shallow that the oxygen monitor began alarming continuously. Dr. Rodriguez rushed into the room with Maria, prepared to perform emergency resuscitation procedures, but Rex's reaction stopped her in her tracks. The German Shepherd had risen to his full height beside the incubator, his body rigid with attention. He began making a sound none of them had heard before, not barking, not whining, but a series of urgent, rhythmic vocalizations that seemed almost like he was calling to Hope. And impossibly, Hope responded. Her tiny body stirred, her breathing deepened slightly, and her heart rate began to climb back towards stable levels. "Did you see that?" Maria whispered, staring at the monitors in disbelief. Her vitals improved the moment he started. Whatever that was. Dr. Rodriguez was taking notes frantically, documenting what she knew would sound impossible to anyone who hadn't witnessed it. "It's like he's functioning as an external pacemaker," she murmured. "Some kind of biofeedback loop I've never seen before." The second crisis came just before dawn. Hope's temperature began dropping rapidly despite the warming equipment, and her responses to stimulus became weaker. Dr. Rodriguez was preparing Jake for the worst when Rex did something that defied every aspect of his police training. Without any command or permission, the German Shepherd carefully positioned himself as close to the incubator as physically possible and began what could only be described as a controlled panting routine, deliberately breathing warm air toward the incubator's ventilation system. His timing was precise, his movements calculated, as if he instinctively understood exactly what Hope needed to regulate her body temperature. "This is impossible," Dr. Rodriguez said quietly, watching the temperature readings gradually stabilize. "He's not just providing comfort, he's actively participating in her medical care." Jake watched his partner work with an intensity he'd never seen before. Rex's entire body was focused on one goal: keeping Hope alive. The dog's muscles were tense with concentration, his breathing controlled and purposeful, his eyes never leaving the tiny orange form in the incubator. "How long can he keep this up?" Jake asked, concerned for both his partner and the kitten. "I don't know," Dr. Rodriguez admitted, "but I'm beginning to think that Hope's survival might depend on Rex's stamina as much as her own will to live." As the sun began to rise over Chicago, painting the hospital walls with soft golden light, Rex continued his vigil. 72 hours had passed since Jake found the cardboard box behind the dumpster, and in that time, Rex had transformed from a police dog into something far more profound, a guardian whose devotion was literally keeping another creature alive. The hospital staff had begun to gather during shift changes, drawn by whispered stories of the German Shepherd, who wouldn't abandon a dying kitten. Nurses, technicians, and even the janitorial staff would pause outside room 3, witnessing something that challenged everything they thought they knew about animal behavior and the bonds that could form between different species. "Whatever happens," Jake told Dr. Rodriguez as they watched another sunrise through the hospital windows, "Rex has already shown me something I'll never forget. He's taught me that sometimes the most important battles aren't the ones we're trained to fight." Dr. Rodriguez nodded, understanding that they were all witnessing something that would change their perspective on animal intelligence, empathy, and the mysterious connections that sometimes form when one creature recognizes another's desperate need for compassion. The morning of the 5th day brought unexpected hope. For the first time since arriving at the Chicago Animal Emergency Hospital, Hope had made it through an entire night without a medical crisis. Her tiny orange body, while still fragile, showed signs of genuine improvement. Her breathing was stronger, her heart rate more stable, and she had even opened her eyes for longer periods, always seeking out Rex's reassuring presence. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez entered room 3 with cautious optimism. Carrying the equipment needed for a comprehensive examination, she had been postponing until hope was strong enough to handle the stress. Rex, who had maintained his protective vigil for over 100 hours with only brief breaks for water, that Jake had to force him to take, lifted his head alertly as she approached. "Good morning, big guy," Dr. Rodriguez said softly to Rex, who had become as much her patient as Hope in recent days. The German shepherd's dedication had taken a visible toll. His eyes were rimmed with exhaustion. His normally pristine coat was disheveled, and he had lost weight from refusing regular meals. Yet his focus on Hope remained unwavering. "I think she's finally stable enough for a complete workup," Dr. Rodriguez explained to Jake, who had been sleeping in the waiting room chairs, refusing to leave the hospital. "I want to get detailed X-rays, blood work, and do a thorough physical examination. Now that she's stronger, I can be more aggressive in checking for underlying issues." Jake nodded, watching as Rex seemed to understand that something important was about to happen. The dog positioned himself where he could observe every aspect of the examination, while staying out of the medical team's way, a compromise he had learned over the past few days. Dr. Rodriguez began with a gentle but thorough external examination, her experienced hands carefully checking Hope's tiny body for injuries, abnormalities, or signs of disease. Hope tolerated the handling well, occasionally mewing softly toward Rex, who would respond with encouraging whines. But as Dr. Rodriguez's examination progressed, her expression began to change. "Jake," she called quietly, "could you come look at this?" Jake approached the examination table, where Dr. Rodriguez was gently palpating Hope's left hind leg. "Feel." "Right here," she said, guiding his finger to a small but distinct irregularity in the bone structure. "And here." She moved his hand to Hope's ribcage, where another subtle deformity was detectable. "What am I feeling?" Jake asked, though a cold dread was already settling in his stomach. "Old fractures," Dr. Rodriguez said grimly. "Healed, but improperly set. This kitten has been hurt before, Jake. Deliberately hurt." The room fell silent, except for the quiet humming of medical equipment. Rex, as if sensing the shift in mood, rose to his feet and moved closer to the examination table, his protective instincts heightening. Dr. Rodriguez continued her examination with increasing concern. "Maria," she called to her technician, "I need the portable X-ray unit in here immediately. We need to see the full extent of what we're dealing with." Over the next hour, a horrifying picture emerged. The X-rays revealed evidence of trauma that could only have come from deliberate abuse. Multiple old fractures in Hope's legs and ribs, all in various stages of healing, told a story of systematic cruelty. Most devastating was evidence of blunt force trauma to her abdomen that had miraculously not caused fatal internal damage. "This wasn't neglect," Dr. Rodriguez said quietly, studying the X-ray images with Jake and Detective Sarah Kim, who had been called to the hospital as soon as Dr. Rodriguez realized they were dealing with a criminal case. This was sustained, deliberate abuse. Someone hurt this kitten repeatedly over weeks, possibly months. Detective Kim, a 20-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department's Animal Crimes Unit, had seen her share of heartbreaking cases, but the X-rays in front of her made her hands clench into fists. "How old would she have been when this started?" she asked. Based on the bone development and healing patterns, Dr. Rodriguez calculated, "I'd estimate she was between 4 and 6 weeks old when the first injuries occurred. She's approximately 10 weeks old now, which means she's spent most of her short life being tortured." Jake felt a rage building inside him, unlike anything he'd experienced in his police career. He looked at Rex, who seemed to sense the terrible revelations being discussed. The German Shepherd had moved even closer to Hope's incubator, his body language communicating a clear message. No one would ever hurt her again. "There's more," Dr. Rodriguez continued, her voice heavy with emotion. "The pattern of injuries suggests this wasn't random violence. Someone was systematically breaking this kitten's bones, probably as punishment or—" She stopped, unable to voice the possibility that someone might have tortured Hope for entertainment. Detective Kim was already taking detailed photographs of the X-rays and Dr. Rodriguez's findings. "This is now a felony animal cruelty investigation," she announced. "Dr. Rodriguez, I'll need comprehensive medical records documenting every injury. This level of deliberate abuse carries serious prison time in Illinois." As the full scope of Hope's suffering became clear, something remarkable happened. Rex, who had been protective before, became what could only be described as a sentinel. His demeanor shifted from gentle guardian to fierce protector. When strangers entered the room, Rex would position himself directly between them and Hope's incubator, his message unmistakable. "He knows," Jake observed quietly. "Somehow, he knows." "What happened to her?" Dr. Rodriguez nodded, making notes for what she knew would become crucial evidence in a criminal case. Animals are incredibly intuitive about trauma. Rex may not understand the details, but he absolutely understands that Hope was hurt by humans and needs protection. The revelation transformed Hope's rescue from a heartwarming story into something much darker. The tiny kitten who had captured everyone's hearts wasn't just an abandoned animal. She was a survivor of systematic torture who had somehow found the strength to cling to life until Rex discovered her. "I want the monster who did this, Detective," Kim said firmly, studying crime scene photos from the alley where Hope had been found. "This kitten was dumped like garbage after weeks of torture. Whoever did this thought they were discarding evidence, but what they actually did was give us a living witness." Jake watched Rex gently nuzzle the incubator where Hope was resting, the dog's protective presence more important now than ever. "What happens next?" he asked. "Now we hunt," Detective Kim replied. "Someone in this city thinks they got away with torturing an innocent animal. They're about to learn that Hope has some very determined advocates." As news of the abuse allegations began to spread through the hospital staff, the atmosphere changed dramatically. What had been a place of medical care and hope became something more, a fortress where dedicated professionals and one extraordinarily devoted German Shepherd stood guard over a tiny survivor, whose story was about to become a rallying cry for justice. Rex settled back into his protective position beside Hope's incubator, but his alertness had intensified. He was no longer just helping a sick kitten recover, he was protecting a victim, and every instinct he possessed as a police dog had awakened to that responsibility. The bond between them had deepened beyond mere affection into something profound, a promise that Hope would never be helpless again. It started with a single photograph. Dr. Rodriguez's colleague, Dr. Michael Chun from Northwestern University's Veterinary Behavior Program, had stopped by the Chicago Animal Emergency Hospital to witness what Rodriguez had described as most extraordinary interspecies bond I've ever documented. When he saw Rex gently positioning himself around Hope's recovery incubator, his scientific mind immediately recognized the significance of what was unfolding. "Lisa, this needs to be shared," Dr. Chun said quietly, capturing a photo of Rex's massive frame curved protectively around the tiny orange kitten, who was now strong enough to sit up and gaze adoringly at her guardian. "The veterinary community needs to see this. The world needs to see this." Dr. Rodriguez hesitated. Patient privacy was sacred in veterinary medicine, but she also understood that Rex and Hope's story represented something larger than just one rescue case. After consulting with Jake and getting permission from the police department, she agreed to let Dr. Chun share the image with a carefully worded explanation about animal empathy and cross-species bonding. Within 12 hours, that single photograph had been shared over 50,000 times across social media platforms. The image struck something deep in viewers, the sight of a powerful police dog tenderly caring for a tiny, vulnerable kitten. Seemed to represent hope in a world that often felt cruel and divided. Officer Morrison, Captain Jennifer Walsh, called Jake into her office early Monday morning. "Your phone has been ringing non-stop. Channel 7 News wants an interview. The Tribune wants to do a feature story. And somehow the mayor's office is asking for updates on a kitten." Jake sat across from his captain, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden attention. "Ma'am, Rex and I were just doing our job. We found an animal in distress and—" "Jake," Captain Walsh interrupted gently, "what you and Rex have done goes far beyond duty. I've been getting calls from police departments across the country asking about our K9 program. This story is giving people hope, and frankly, our department could use some positive press." The media attention intensified throughout the week. Chicago's WGN-TV ran a 5-minute segment during their evening news, interviewing Dr. Rodriguez about Hope's recovery and Rex's unprecedented behavior. The segment ended with footage of Rex gently nuzzling Hope, who had grown strong enough to purr a sound that seemed to make the German shepherd's tail wag for the first time since the rescue began. But it was when the story hit social media that everything exploded. A TikTok video showing Hope trying to bark in tiny mews while sitting next to Rex garnered over 2 million views in 24 hours. Instagram posts using #Rex and Hope began flooding timelines worldwide. The hashtag dogs and cats started trending as people shared their own stories of unlikely animal friendships. The international breakthrough came when BBC News picked up the story for their morning program. The British anchor, Victoria Hamilton, introduced the segment with tears in her eyes. In a week filled with difficult news from around the world, we want to share a story from Chicago that reminds us of the capacity for love that exists in the most unexpected places. As the story spread globally, something beautiful began happening at the hospital. Donation packages started arriving from across the world, not just money for Hope's medical care, which had long been covered, but supplies for the entire animal emergency hospital. A children's class from Tokyo sent drawings of dogs and cats playing together. A retirement home in Dublin collected blankets for animal shelters. A school in São Paulo organized a fundraiser for police K9 units. "This is unprecedented, Maria," Santos told Dr. Rodriguez as they sorted through the latest batch of mail. "We've received donations from 6 continents. People are sending money specifically to help other abused animals because Hope's story inspired them." The most touching responses came from children. 8-year-old Emma Patterson from Portland wrote, "Dear Rex, thank you for saving Hope. My mom says you're the goodest boy ever. I'm sending my allowance so you can save more kittens." The letter came with 3 crumpled dollar bills and a drawing of a large black dog standing next to a tiny orange cat. Jake began receiving interview requests from national news programs, but he consistently redirected attention to the broader issue of animal abuse and the importance of police K9 programs. Rex is just one example of how these dogs serve our communities, he told CNN's Anderson Cooper during a satellite interview from the hospital. But Hope's case also shows us that animal cruelty is a serious crime that deserves serious attention. A viral attention brought unexpected developments in the investigation. Detective Sarah Kim received over 200 tips from the public after Hope's story aired, including several promising leads about possible suspects in the neighborhood where she was found. Sometimes it takes a story like this to make people realize that animal abuse isn't a minor crime, Kim explained to reporters. It's a felony that often escalates to violence against humans. As Hope continued to recover, her personality began emerging in ways that delighted everyone following her story. She had indeed imprinted completely on Rex, following him everywhere her small legs could carry her, attempting to mirror his confident walk, and even trying to alert things the way she'd seen Rex do during his training exercises at the hospital. She thinks she's a police dog, Jake laughed during a Facebook live session that drew over 100,000 viewers. Yesterday she tried to bark at a suspicious-looking pigeon in the hospital courtyard. Rex just looked at her like, "Good try, kid." The most viral moment came when Hope, now strong enough to play, was caught on video trying to perform Rex's signature down-stay command. The tiny kitten would crouch low, her tail twitching with the effort of staying still, while Rex lay beside her in perfect formation. The video, captioned Police Academy, Kitten Division, was shared over 5 million times and spawned countless memes about interspecies training programs. Celebrity endorsements began pouring in. Ellen DeGeneres featured Rex and Hope on her show via video call, promising to donate $25,000 to animal abuse prevention programs. Chris Evans, known for his love of dogs, shared the story with his millions of followers, calling Rex a real-life superhero. Even the Chicago Bulls dedicated a moment of silence during their next home game to all the animals waiting for their own Rex to find them. The global attention transformed Hope's story from a local rescue into a movement. Animal shelters worldwide reported increased adoptions, with many people specifically requesting bonded pairs of different species. Police departments saw a surge in applications for their K9 programs, with applicants citing Rex's compassion as inspiration for their career choice. What started as one officer and his dog finding an abandoned kitten has become something none of us could have predicted. Dr. Rodriguez told the Chicago Tribune, "Rex and Hope have reminded the world that love doesn't see species, size, or differences. It just sees a soul in need." As week 2 of Hope's recovery began, Jake realized that his and Rex's lives had been forever changed. They had become symbols of compassion in a world hungry for hope, and their story was inspiring acts of kindness across the globe, exactly the kind of positive change that both Officer and K9 had sworn to serve. The breakthrough in Hope's case came from an unexpected source. Among the hundreds of tips flooding Detective Sarah Kim's phone, one stood out with chilling clarity. Mrs. Eleanor Vasquez, a 73-year-old retired teacher who lived 3 blocks from where Rex had found Hope, called the police tip line with trembling hands after seeing the story on the evening news. "I've been losing sleep over this," Mrs. Vasquez told Detective Kim during their meeting at her small apartment overlooking the alley where Hope had been abandoned. "I kept hearing these horrible sounds coming from the apartment above the pawn shop on Harrison Street. Crying, yelling, and sounds I didn't want to believe were what I thought they were." Mrs. Vasquez led Detective Kim to her kitchen window, which provided a direct view into the second-floor apartment she'd been watching with growing concern for weeks. The man who lived there, Marcus Thompson, he had a drinking problem. I'd see him stumbling home at all hours, and then I'd hear the most terrible sounds. When I saw that precious kitten on the news, and you said where she was found, I knew I had to speak up. Detective Kim felt her pulse quicken as Mrs. Vasquez continued. "About 2 weeks ago, I saw him throw something behind the dumpster in that exact spot. It was night, but the street light caught enough for me to see it was a cardboard box. The next day, I didn't hear any more of those awful crying sounds from his apartment. I should have called sooner, but I was scared." Within hours, Detective Kim had obtained a search warrant for Marcus Thompson's apartment. What they found there made even seasoned investigators sick to their stomachs. The one-bedroom unit was filled with evidence of systematic animal cruelty, makeshift cages, blood-stained towels, and worst of all, a journal detailing Thompson's torture of not just Hope, but several other animals over the past year. "This is one of the most disturbing cases I've handled in 20 years, Detective Kim told District Attorney Rebecca Martinez as they reviewed the evidence. Thompson was documenting his crimes, apparently proud of what he was doing. He wrote about training animals through pain, describing it like some kind of twisted scientific experiment. The journal entries about Hope were particularly heartbreaking. Thompson had acquired her from someone selling free kittens outside a grocery store, specifically choosing the smallest one because he believed she would be easier to control. His entries detailed weeks of torture, describing Hope's injuries, with clinical detachment, while expressing frustration that she wouldn't stop crying. The final entry, dated just 3 days before Rex found Hope, was chilling. The orange one is making too much noise. Neighbors might complain. Time to dispose of evidence. Marcus Thompson was arrested at his construction job the next morning. The 34-year-old man with a history of domestic violence charges showed no remorse when confronted with the evidence. In fact, he seemed annoyed that his activities had been discovered, telling arresting officers that he was just having some fun with strays. The arrest made national news, with Thompson's mugshot appearing alongside the now famous photos of Rex and Hope. The contrast was stark. Thompson's cold, indifferent expression versus the images of Rex's gentle care for his tiny patient. This arrest sends a clear message, District Attorney Martinez announced at a press conference that drew media from around the world. Animal cruelty is not a minor offense in Cook County. Mr. Thompson is being charged with aggravated animal cruelty, a Class 4 felony that carries up to 3 years in prison and $25,000 in fines. We will prosecute this case to the fullest extent of the law. But the legal victory was only part of Hope's healing journey. As the weeks passed and her physical wounds mended, the psychological trauma became more apparent. Hope exhibited behaviors consistent with severe PTSD, sudden startling at loud noises, cowering when unfamiliar humans approached, and periodic episodes where she would cry inconsolably until Rex positioned himself as a protective barrier around her. Dr. Rodriguez consulted with Dr. Patricia Morales, a veterinary behaviorist from the University of Illinois, to develop a treatment plan for Hope's psychological recovery. Trauma in young animals can have lasting effects, Dr. Morales explained to Jake and the medical team. Hope associates humans with pain and terror, but she's learned that Rex represents safety. We need to very gradually help her understand that not all humans are threats. The rehabilitation process became another viral sensation as followers around the world watched Hope's daily progress. Video updates showed her tentative first steps outside her safe space, always with Rex as her security blanket. The breakthrough moment came when Hope, after weeks of fear-based responses, voluntarily approached Jake's outstretched hand and allowed him to pet her while Rex watched approvingly. That was the moment we knew she was going to be okay. Dr. Rodriguez later wrote in her case study for the Journal of Veterinary Behavior. Hope had learned to trust again, but only because Rex had shown her what safety looked like. The healing process revealed something remarkable about Hope's personality. Beneath the trauma was a kitten with extraordinary intelligence and resilience. She began mimicking Rex's behaviors with uncanny accuracy, sitting at attention when Jake put on his uniform, patrolling the hospital corridors beside Rex during his exercise walks, and even attempting to alert to suspicious activities like Rex did during his police work. She's not just copying him, observed Dr. Morales during one of her evaluation sessions. She's genuinely trying to become his partner. In her mind, being like Rex means being safe, strong, and valued. The most touching aspect of Hope's recovery was how she began helping other traumatized animals at the hospital. When frightened or injured animals arrived, Hope would position herself near their enclosures, providing the same calming presence that Rex had given her. Her gentle purring seemed to soothe anxious patients in ways that surprised even the veterinary staff. Hope has become our unofficial therapy cat, Maria Santos observed. She has this intuitive understanding of what suffering feels like, and she uses that knowledge to comfort others. Rex taught her about compassion, and now she's paying it forward. As Thompson's court date approached, the case had sparked a nationwide conversation about animal welfare laws. Legal experts predicted that Hope's case would set precedents for prosecuting animal cruelty, while animal rights organizations used the story to push for stronger penalties and better enforcement. But for Jake, watching Rex and Hope together during their daily training walks around the hospital, the most important justice was already being served. Hope was alive, healing, and learning to trust again. Rex had saved more than just one kitten's life. He had demonstrated that even in the darkest circumstances, love and protection could triumph over cruelty and abandonment. The bond between them had become something sacred, a living testament to the power of unconditional compassion that was inspiring people around the world to look for their own opportunities to protect the vulnerable and stand up against cruelty wherever they found it. 3 months after that fateful morning behind the dumpster, Hope had transformed from a dying kitten into a small but mighty orange tabby with the heart of a police dog. At 12 weeks old, she weighed a healthy 2 pounds and possessed a energy that both delighted and amazed everyone at the Chicago Animal Emergency Hospital, which had become her temporary home during the longest recovery period in the facility's history. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez stood in the hospital's main corridor, clipboard in hand, watching what had become the morning routine that drew staff members from every department. Hope sat at perfect attention beside Rex, her tiny orange form a miniature mirror of the German Shepherd's disciplined posture. When Rex shifted his weight, Hope shifted hers. When Rex's ears perked at a sound, Hope's did too. When Rex performed his morning patrol of the hospital corridors, Hope trotted beside him with the confident gait of a seasoned officer. It's like watching a master class in behavioral imprinting, Dr. Rodriguez murmured to Dr. Patricia Morales, who had driven in from the University of Illinois, specifically to document Hope's unprecedented development. She's not just copying Rex's behaviors, she's internalized his entire approach to the world. The transformation had been gradual but remarkable. Hope's initial terror of humans had given way to cautious curiosity, then growing confidence, and finally to what could only be described as a protective instinct that mirrored Rex's own. When new patients arrived at the hospital in distress, Hope would position herself strategically, not to comfort them directly, but to assess whether they posed any threat to Rex or to her expanding circle of trusted humans. She's become his partner in every sense, observed Jake Morrison, who had taken to bringing Rex to the hospital for extended visits that had essentially become unofficial training sessions. Watch this. Jake pulled out his radio and spoke into it with the authoritative tone he used during police work. Unit 47 requesting backup at Harrison and 5th. Immediately, both Rex and Hope snapped to attention. Rex's response was trained and professional, but Hope's reaction was purely instinctual. She had learned to associate that tone and those words with important work that required focus and readiness. The most remarkable development was Hope's apparent understanding of Rex's actual police duties. During Jake's shifts, when Rex was called away for real police work, Hope would position herself at the hospital's main window, watching the parking lot with unwavering attention until the patrol car returned. Dr. Rodriguez had documented over 50 instances of Hope correctly predicting Rex's return, often moving to the window minutes before the patrol car appeared. There's no scientific explanation for how she knows. Dr. Rodriguez admitted to the growing number of researchers who had come to study the unusual bond. We've tested every variable time of day, scheduling patterns, even Jake's behavior before leaving. Hope just knows when Rex is coming back. The connection had also enhanced Rex's own abilities in ways that surprised even Jake. The German Shepherd had always been an exceptional police dog, but his experience with Hope had awakened a sensitivity that made him remarkably effective in situations involving vulnerable individuals. During domestic violence calls, Rex seemed to instinctively understand which family members needed protection and which posed threats. His success rate in locating missing children had improved dramatically, as if caring for Hope had sharpened his ability to think like someone small and scared. Rex has become the most empathetic police dog I've ever worked with, Captain Jennifer Walsh observed during a department meeting where Rex and Hope's story had prompted a discussion about expanding the K9 program to include therapy work. His ability to read human emotions and respond appropriately has made him invaluable in community policing situations. The most touching evidence of their bond occurred during what the hospital staff had dubbed the Great Escape Attempt. During Week 10 of Hope's recovery, a construction crew working on the hospital's roof accidentally left a door propped open. Hope, whose curiosity had been growing along with her confidence, wandered through the open door and found herself on the hospital's flat roof, 3 stories above the ground. When Hope's absence was discovered, Rex's reaction was immediate and intense. The normally disciplined dog began a search pattern that started in Hope's favorite hiding spots and gradually expanded throughout the building. But it was when Rex reached the stairwell leading to the roof that his behavior became extraordinary. He began a specific series of barks, urgent but controlled, that Jake had never heard before. "He's trying to tell us something," Jake realized, following Rex up the stairs. When they reached the roof access door, Rex's agitation intensified, but he also displayed remarkable restraint, as if he understood that the situation required careful handling. They found Hope sitting calmly at the roof's edge, not in immediate danger, but clearly unable to figure out how to return to safety. What happened next became legendary among the hospital staff. Rex approached Hope slowly, making soft, encouraging sounds, then positioned himself between her and the roof's edge, using gentle nudges and what could only be described as guidance behavior. Rex led Hope back to the door, keeping his body as a barrier to prevent any accidental falls. He performed a rescue operation, Dr. Morales documented in her behavioral notes. Rex assessed the situation, developed a strategy, and executed a plan to ensure Hope's safety. This wasn't instinct. This was problem-solving at a level that suggests genuine emotional intelligence. The incident solidified what everyone had been observing. Hope and Rex were no longer just a rescued kitten and her protector. They had become true partners, each enhancing the other's abilities and confidence. Hope's presence had made Rex more gentle and intuitive, while Rex's protection had allowed Hope to develop a courage that seemed impossible given her traumatic beginning. As autumn approached and discussions about Hope's permanent placement became more frequent, one fact had become undeniably clear. Separation was not an option. Hope didn't just prefer Rex's company. She had structured her entire understanding of the world around their partnership. When separated for even brief periods, Hope would exhibit signs of distress that went beyond normal attachment. She would stop eating, become lethargic, and position herself at windows or doors, waiting for Rex's return with a devotion that moved even the most scientifically minded observers. Rex's attachment was equally profound. During one emergency call that kept him away from the hospital for over 12 hours, Rex's performance suffered noticeably. Jake reported that his partner seemed distracted and anxious, constantly looking back toward the direction of the hospital, as if his primary responsibility was elsewhere. They've bonded at a level that transcends species, Dr. Rodriguez concluded in her final behavioral assessment. Hope has imprinted on Rex as her family protector and role model. Rex has accepted Hope as his responsibility and partner. They've created something entirely new, an interspecies working relationship based on mutual trust, protection, and what can only be called love. As week 12 of Hope's recovery ended, the question that had been quietly growing louder could no longer be avoided. What would happen to this extraordinary pair when Hope was deemed healthy enough for adoption? The answer would determine not just their future, but the future of everyone whose lives had been changed by witnessing the power of unconditional devotion. The adoption applications began arriving the moment news outlets reported that Hope was finally healthy enough for permanent placement. By the end of the first week, Dr. Rodriguez's office was overflowing with letters from families across the globe. Over 3,000 requests from people who wanted to give the famous kitten a loving home. Each application was heartfelt, many accompanied by photos of existing pets and detailed plans for Hope's care. There were offers from celebrity families, ranchers with vast properties, and ordinary people whose lives had been touched by her story. But there was one application that stood out among all the others, not because it came from someone wealthy or famous, but because it came from someone who understood exactly what Hope needed. Jake Morrison sat at his kitchen table on a quiet Sunday morning, staring at the adoption paperwork that Dr. Rodriguez had given him 3 days earlier. Rex lay at his feet, and for the first time in months, Hope was there too, curled up in the space between Rex's front paws, purring softly. It was a trial weekend, designed to see how Hope would adapt to a home environment after spending her entire recovery at the hospital. The answer was clear from the moment they'd walked through Jake's front door. Hope had conducted a thorough inspection of the apartment, staying close to Rex, but moving with the confident curiosity of someone who felt completely safe. She had claimed the sunny spot by the living room window as her observation post, positioned herself strategically near Rex's food and water bowls, and by evening had established a routine that mirrored Rex's own schedule perfectly. "What do you think, partner?" Jake asked Rex, who lifted his head to look at Hope sleeping peacefully against his chest. "Think we can handle a permanent roommate?" The question had become more complex than Jake had initially realized. Hope wasn't just any cat looking for a home. She was a cat who believed she was a police dog and whose entire world revolved around Rex. Traditional adoption wasn't going to work, and Jake had spent sleepless nights trying to figure out how to navigate the bureaucratic complications of what he really wanted to do. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Captain Jennifer Walsh had been following Hope's story closely, not just as Jake's supervisor, but as someone who had witnessed firsthand how Rex's experience with Hope had transformed him into an even more effective officer. During their Monday morning briefing, she made an announcement that would change everything. "The mayor's office has been in contact with me," Captain Walsh told Jake, setting down a folder marked with the official seal of the city of Chicago. Hope's story has become an international symbol of compassion and resilience. The publicity has been overwhelmingly positive for our department, and more importantly, for our city's image. They want to make this official. Jake opened the folder to find documents he never could have imagined. An official designation of Hope as the Chicago Police Department's first community wellness companion, a position created specifically for her unique circumstances. The designation would allow Hope to accompany Rex on appropriate community outreach visits, school programs, and public relations events while living with Jake as her permanent guardian. "This is unprecedented," Captain Walsh continued. "But then again, so is Hope. The department recognizes that Rex and Hope have become more than just a police dog and a rescued kitten. They've become a team that represents something important about what we're trying to achieve in community policing." The paperwork included provisions for Hope's continued veterinary care, liability insurance, and even a small budget for her participation in department activities. But most importantly, it recognized what everyone who had witnessed their bond already knew. Rex and Hope were meant to be together, and their partnership served a purpose larger than either of them individually. Dr. Rodriguez was in her office, reviewing Hope's final medical records when Jake arrived with the official adoption papers and the department's designation documents. After 4 months of intensive care, Hope was not just physically healthy, she was thriving in ways that exceeded every expectation. Her transformation has been remarkable, Dr. Rodriguez said, watching Hope perform a perfect sit-stay beside Rex in the examination room. When I first examined her, I wasn't sure she would survive the night. Now look at her, she's confident, healthy, and has developed her own unique personality while maintaining this extraordinary bond with Rex. The medical records told an amazing story. Hope now weighed a healthy 4 pounds, had perfect blood work, and showed no lasting physical effects from her early trauma. More importantly, her psychological evaluations indicated a well-adjusted, confident animal who had learned to trust again through Rex's patient guidance. The most remarkable thing, Dr. Rodriguez continued, is how she's maintained her own feline instincts while adopting Rex's behavioral patterns. She hunts toy mice with the focus of a police dog tracking suspects. She patrols Jake's apartment with the systematic thoroughness Rex uses in his work. She's created a new category, a cat who thinks like a working dog. The official adoption ceremony took place at the hospital, with media coverage that reached every continent. Hope wore a tiny collar with a badge-style tag that read, Community Wellness Companion, Chicago PD, while Rex sat beside her in full dress uniform. The photos at the adoption signing, with Hope placing her tiny paw print next to Jake's signature, while Rex watched proudly, became iconic images that symbolized the power of second chances and unconditional love. But the most touching moment came during the informal celebration afterward. As hospital staff, police officers, and supporters gathered to congratulate the new family, Hope demonstrated her own version of a police salute sitting at perfect attention while Rex performed his formal greeting routine for visiting dignitaries. The crowd fell silent as they watched the tiny orange cat mirror her partner's every movement with precision that spoke to months of observation and practice. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Walsh announced to the gathering, I present to you Chicago's newest community policing team, Officer Jake Morrison, Canine Rex, and Community Wellness Companion Hope. They've shown us that sometimes the most important rescues lead to the most extraordinary partnerships. As the celebration continued around them, Jake watched Rex and Hope settle into their favorite position. Hope curled up between Rex's front paws, both of them alert and watching their surroundings with the calm confidence of a team that knew they belonged together. What had started as a routine patrol 4 months earlier had become something none of them could have imagined. A family bound not by species or training, but by a love strong enough to overcome trauma, transform lives, and inspire a world hungry for hope. In the weeks that followed, Rex and Hope began their new role visiting schools and community centers, where Hope's story helped children understand the importance of kindness to animals, while Rex's presence reinforced positive relationships with police officers. Together, they had become living proof that healing was possible, that love could triumph over cruelty, and that sometimes the most unlikely partnerships created the strongest bonds. Their story had begun with abandonment and ended with belonging, started with near death and concluded with new life, and transformed a routine police patrol into a testament to the power of compassion that would inspire people around the world. For years to come, Rex had saved Hope's life, but in doing so, Hope had taught Rex and everyone who witnessed their bond that sometimes the greatest strength comes from protecting those who cannot protect themselves.